All right, folks, we talked about the trenches. We talked about the secondary. For our final positional review for Iowa State versus Kansas State, we're going to talk about the linebackers. This next layer of defense has some serious intrigue heading into 2025. Let's do that right here on Farmageddon Friday.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, hit me with that beat, Nick. It's a Locked On College Crossover, Farmageddon Friday, Locked On Kansas State, and Locked On Cyclones. I'm your host, Christian Rao, here with the co-host, Nick Maravets, bringing you Farmageddon Friday every single Friday, all the way up till August 23rd, Week 0, college football, night 1. Exciting stuff, and we're going to break it down for you. Positional breakdown, the final breakdown, and then we got a special treat for you at the very end where we're going to basically play left, right, center when we talk about every single positional group all the way from top to bottom that we covered over the past 8 or 9 weeks. Lots of stuff to talk about on this episode. Make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you're listening and rate, review wherever you are listening, either in audio or a YouTube version. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150. Hold the mic, $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel. So again, we've talked about the trenches. We've talked about the secondary. We've talked about the entire offensive core. And I think we saved the most exciting one for last. At least I know for you. I'm excited about the linebacking core as well. I think Kansas State has one of the most experienced rooms in recent years, but they're also impacted by scheme shifts and portal additions and a couple other breakout things. And I want to hear that, and we're going to talk about that in the future because, of course, just like every other positional review we've had, Nick, you won Farmageddon last year, and for the final time, you get to go first in these positional reviews. So tell me about your linebacking core. Tell me why you were so excited to save this one for last and why you think this could be one of the best groups on the Cyclones this season.
I think this might be one of the best groups in the Big 12. I am so excited for this linebacker group. For those of you who don't know, which pretty much only really applies to Kansas State fans listening to this, Iowa State was absolutely riddled with injuries last season. The injury bug ran rampant through Ames, Iowa, and the linebacker group got hit very hard. Very, very hard. Caleb Bacon, Carson Willick, John Klosterman, Will McLaughlin, Cale Brazina, Zachary Lovett, in order of games missed there, 13, 14, 10, 9, 6, 4, respectively. Missing over 55 games total. Yeah, that's a lot of games. That's a lot of missed reps, if you will. Are games affected by that? If you said no, I don't think you really know what you're talking about. I'm not going to lie to you. I am so excited for this linebacker core because the guys that got hurt last season are A-tier players. Very, very good at playing the game we call football. Okay. Now, this has a twofold impact. Okay, let's try to break this down here. Because the A-tier players were missing last season, we now have a lower baseline of what the Iowa State linebacking unit looks like, right? So now this season, by putting those guys in, you automatically raise your line of play above the baseline from last season with the same guys. You didn't even have to have a crazy transfer portal. You didn't have to have a crazy recruiting class. It's the same dudes. Okay, so now we're already there. The other piece of that puzzle, however, as I said, this is a two-sided coin. All of the guys that played in their place last year got a ridiculous amount of reps. And they are now either playing or backing up as depth pieces the guys that are on the field. So this unit is top to bottom now significantly better than they were last season because you either are playing a guy that wasn't playing at all last year or they put in way more reps than they normally would have and now are better for it. This linebacking group, I am not even joking, I think will be the best in the Big 12.
I like the whole holistic approach in view of this Iowa State linebacking core. And I do think that you're right. I think it's going to be a very good linebacking core in 2025. It's something that I can't wait to expose, especially on the tight end room, because I know that Kansas State's going to do it. I'm very excited to do that for you, Nick. I'm really excited for that. But tell me about your main dude, your alpha, if you will. I have an alpha over on Kansas State. There's no doubt about that. But what is the number one guy for Iowa State? If you had to say who's the leader of this linebacking room, who's the one who's going to probably finish the season with the most tackles on the roster, who's it going to be and why he is the guy that's going to lead this room to being one of the best, if not the best linebacking room in the Big 12 and potentially the country?
I think the easy answer there is probably Caleb Bacon, 6'4", 245, coming off an injury. When he went down, it felt like the earth kind of like there was a crack in the earth a little bit. It was a big deal when he went down last year. So he's a guy that immediately comes to mind. Zachary Lovett, another guy that Matt Campbell talked about, obviously at media days, could really be an absolute weapon. Of another name that I think it could be maybe more of a sleeper, but not quite in the same conversation. But definitely in there. You got your McLaughlin, your Klostermans in there. It's hard to pick out one guy specifically, but I do think Caleb Bacon or Zachary Lovett will probably be that guy. That's my guess. Maybe Cooper Ebel, another name that kind of gets thrown around in there. Yeah, I'm just excited to see this unit act as a whole. And another thing that I didn't bring up there in the first kind of spiel, if you will, kind of split this up. I do want to mention it because I don't know if you're going to specifically ask at this, and I want to make it clear how big of a difference this is going to be from last season. There were times when there was a level of uncertainty from the linebacking unit because the guys were so young. That's not going to be the case this season. The linebackers are supposed to be kind of like the commander-in-chief out there on the field. They're the ones dictating, hey, up front, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're getting, because the safeties and corners, they're running around figuring out what's going on. It's kind of like it's not, but it's like two separate fields of play. Like you got your safeties and corners. They do have more vision, but they're more so worried about what's going on in the secondary, figuring out who's counting from in where. Is he a 1? Is he a 2? Where do you have? Are you in quarters? Are you manning that? Are we flipping the field? What exactly is going on in the secondary? The linebackers are the ones that are counting, Larry, Ringo. Hey, coming, this stunt, whatever they're going to call. They're kind of like the guys. But last year they were very inexperienced, and they weren't the guys. The secondary at times was telling them like, hey, come over here. You got to come 3 yards to the right. You got to line up over here, dude, because you've got this split back wing that's flipping this strength. It's flipping our defensive call then. Like it was actually backwards. So this season, with more veteran guys in, and like I said, those guys that have more reps, we're not going to see that type of mishap, which led to, I think, a lot of misplays. And that's going to lead to, obviously, better run stops and better passing defense. I couldn't be higher on this linebacking unit. Obviously, everyone knows how important linebackers are, but the jump from last year to this year, I don't think can be overstated. And it's done with like minimal to, I don't even know if there is like any additions to this room that are of note. Like it's just going under the radar, I feel like, by quite a few people. Don't sleep on these linebackers. This is going to be kind of the key to the Iowa State defense.
Well, saying about under the radar, let's talk about some of the other positions around this linebacking crew and see how they can benefit from it. We've talked about all the other position groups over the past few weeks. You talk about how last year the defensive line wasn't up to par. And then we talk about in your secondary conversation how there might be some potential leadership questions. I remember that being one of your narratives. However, someone in the secondary, someone on defensive line, both appeared at media days for Iowa State this past couple weeks ago. What's your thoughts? But no one from the linebacking core. So what's your thoughts about how the defensive front and the secondary can help this linebacking core be that elite type of group to make sure that they can keep this defense well suited, potentially get them back to the Big 12 championship?
The way that I see it is it's actually the other way, but that's just, I think, more of a personal philosophy that the linebacking core kind of helps out the line and the secondary. It's kind of like the only thing that's coming to my mind is Neapolitan ice cream, which doesn't make sense.
So what you're saying is the linebackers are the chocolate then?
They're the ones in the middle, whichever. It's usually what? vanilla, strawberry, chocolate, I thought, right? So they'd be the
Yeah, but
strawberry.
the chocolate's the best one.
Well, in this case, they are definitely the best one, but I was going with more of the middle, could kind of go either way.
Okay.
Strawberry, vanilla, or strawberry chocolate, I think can go both ways. Nonetheless, totally doesn't make any sense. I apologize for that. But I think that the linebacker, I think that they're going to assist, with stunts up front and clog those holes in the run game. And we've talked so much about the pressure that the defensive line, what that does for the secondary. The linebackers being in the right position, having more reps under their belt, being those A type of linebackers, being able to identify that's a pass early, getting into their zones, stopping guys from crossing the field. I mean, it's really just what I'm saying is basic linebacking things. Like, what do you do as a linebacker? But I just think that they're going to be so much better at that this year than they were last year. They're going to be faster. They're going to be stronger. They're going to be smarter. This unit, like, I've gotten to the point in this, like, where I'm just like, they're good, period. They're going to be amazing.
If Iowa State beats Kansas State in week 0, it's because the linebackers did what?
Showed up, didn't get hurt. I think at this point, it's literally that they're that good. I mean, yeah, fly around, make plays, strip the ball a few times, couple picks, turnovers, like general things. I think they're so good. It's literally like, just do you play ball, go out there, fly around, do your thing.
I love that. All right. Lots to talk about there. But I'll tell you this, Kansas State's linebacking core is also interesting. I think it's been one of the best. It's going to be one of the best in recent years, especially with the alpha. Let's start there as we switch sides here for the final time of this positional reviews. Not the final time for Farmageddon Friday, of course.
No.
Right here on this Locked On College Crossover. But before we do so, Nick, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make games even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game with your friends or getting sunburned at the beach. Look, the second half of the MLB season is fully underway. We had the All-Star game just a few weeks ago. Obviously, it was a fun All-Star game home run derby. Now it's time to pick your over-unders on who will make the playoffs, who will win divisions. Will we see the Kansas City Royals win the American League Central? Will that happen? Or are you going to think maybe, I don't know, Iowa, or you got one of those Cubs fans, NL Central? Can they run the table and make that happen? Your choice to make that. You can check it out with FanDuel with their great interface. I think it's one of the coolest apps, one of the best apps in all of the phone, if you name it. I just really enjoy that interface. And I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and apps keep it fresh. And they got this new daily promotions to make it a fun way to bet. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5. And Nick, with that $5, if you win that, guess what? You can win $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. So I don't know about you, but I think you should open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Iowa State's linebacking core, in my opinion, is literally the best in the nation. Not only the Big 12, but in the nation. And you were talking kind of highly, like sneakily, about Kansas State in there. You say you've got an alpha. That's where I want to start. I want to know about this linebacking unit as a whole. I want to know how it's going to affect Iowa State, yada, yada, yada. We got questions. All right, all of us Cyclones over here we're very concerned about the linebacking unit, especially if there's a guy you're calling the dude, the alpha. Who is this guy, and what makes him so good?
Oh, it's absolutely Austin Romaine. He has been he might be the best player on the roster. Actually, I take that back. I think he is the best player on the roster. It's really easy to say Avery Johnson. It's really easy to say maybe a couple other players, and the hype obviously is a lot easier to go throw to the quarterback. But Austin Romaine is the best player on Kansas State's roster. He is the alpha. He has become a household name in Manhattan. Actually, I'd say inside and outside of Manhattan. He's the highest rated Kansas State player on the new EA Sports video game. I mean, how about that? You want that? That's some good news. And you don't have to worry about Avery Johnson's hair because you get no worries. But Austin, have you seen the hair of Avery Johnson on that game? It's bad, man. It is bad. They did my boy no justice. But First team all Big 12 linebacker. He's drawn real NFL buzz. I guarantee you he will be a top 100 pick. I'd probably even push it more towards top 75. Could even be the top linebacker taken. I mean, actual good linebacker, maybe not like pass rush or edge guy, but actual true linebacker. Several mocks have him in the second round, so maybe top 60. He's turned down portal offers to go to the SEC, to the Big Ten, so he could stay and help this defense lead and get back to a Big 12 title run. He's the kind of linebacker you build modern defenses around. He's physical. He's loyal. He's just an all-around great player. He was thrown to the fire his initial season because there was injuries to Kansas State's linebacking core as well. And he did well. He obviously had some blunders, but then last year he shined, especially right off the bat, had some great turnovers. He's going to go all out this year. I mean, you see Pro Football Focus, PFF, giving him some of the highest scores in the country, not just the Big 12, as some of the returning linebackers. He gets the hype he deserves, and I think he's going to be a player that really shines for you. So Austin Romaine, the alpha, no doubt in my mind. He is the best player on Kansas State.
Okay, so Austin Romaine, keep an eye out for that. We're not talking about romaine lettuce here. No. We're talking about Austin, the Boston, if you will. Not probably from Boston, but you get where I was going with that.
Austin Romaine,
big What about salad. The rest of the unit? Big salad, big linebacker, big salad.
Yep, big salad. The rest of the linebacking unit, I think, is interesting. I don't know if I'm as high on the linebacking core as you are, but I will say that I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot of excitement for the linebacking core. I think they have a chance to be one of the top linebacking cores in the Big 12. I do think that they have the opportunity to do so. You have a steady veteran in Desmond Purnell, who's a fifth-year senior. He started 25 of 26 games over the last 2 years. He only had an offer from Kansas State, was lightly recruited, but it's been great since there. That just shows that Chris Kleiman, as recruiting staff, is very good at fit. They're so good at fit. They might not find the best talent when it comes to the eyes of these rivals on threes, ESPNs, but he knows how to find the right fit. And I think that's way more important than any stars can tell you, Nick. Production's ramped up too. 9.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks in the last season. He brings leadership. He brings continuity. So there's a lot of excitement around Purnell. And I think when you put Romaine and Purnell together, you got a lot of excitement in that linebacking core. And then I'll add this player because I think he is the most exciting and with the most question marks because he's coming into the transfer portal. And just like on the offensive side with the new named left tackle in George Fitzpatrick, Gabe Powers comes from Ohio State, and he's transfers with huge upside. He played 12 games for the Buckeyes last year, and I think he's just an absolute unit. He's a dog. When I've seen his highlights, his film, it's not much. There's not much there, but he just seems like an absolute athlete. He's a specimen. He's exciting. You hear all these hypes from players in the spring of how they feel about Gabe Powers just stepping up and being just an absolute player and a good leader right off the bat. And by the way, that name, all-team name, Gabe Powers, That's a great name. He chose Kansas State over UNC, over Minnesota, over Wisconsin in the portal. Will Howard helped him push him towards Manhattan, which was pretty cool. I think his role will depend much on how Kansas State commits to the 4-2-5. I think that's really the main thing here is, will the 4-2-5 be the main thing under the defensive coordinator in Klosterman? But he may end up as the third linebacker in the rotation. Not necessarily a bad thing for Kansas State because that means depth is there. And if he continues to show flashes in fall camp, which I'm sure he will as long as he's healthy, I think he's going to be great. If the lights come on early, Power could be a mainstay for Kansas State. He's got more than just this year of eligibility. And again, when it comes to fit, the past is in the pudding, and Chris Kleiman and his recruiting staff, and that comes into play when you talk about transfers as well, have done a really good job at finding fit. And you get a player like Powers, lots of exciting here. But to me, to get him on the field most and maybe get him in the starting lineup, it's all going to depend on scheme.
Gotcha. Okay, committing to the scheme that's probably going to help the players the most. Now, scheme and players both play a role in stopping an offense, right? Maybe don't run a 5-man front if the team you're facing is passing all the time. Now, granted, you never know exactly. Sometimes that might be the right play. All right, the situations are situational, as they say. The reason I bring all of this up is I'm curious, can this linebacking unit stop both the pass and the run for Iowa State. I think Iowa State has a very solid running game, definitely with Hansen and Abu and the guys they're returning and whatnot. River Peppers being named multiple times. And the receiving game, not just from the wide receivers, but across the board, tight ends as well. I think Iowa State will be all right. I think we'll be okay. Can the linebacking unit stop both, or will Iowa State be able to poke holes in that unit early and realize, all right, if we just throw it to Cooper Alexander every play, that's a good 7 yards.
Yeah, separation was an issue last year with the linebacking core. That might have been one of the biggest issues for that linebacking core, keeping speed up with getting to the outsides, allowing tight ends to get into some of the flats and some of the spacings, and that really impacted them. Now, obviously, if the defensive front, the trenches do their job and get to the pressure a lot sooner, that fixes that problem, but you can't rely on that. You can't rely on that whatsoever. Flexibility is probably the key word that I'd use for these linebackers here when it comes to Powers, Purnell, Romaine. There's obviously a few others as well. Those are just the three that really stand out when we're talking about this conversation because they all bring different strengths. We'll see if speed can become one of them and awareness. Obviously, awareness can overcome speed, can make sure that you get to the right spot at the right time. So fall camps can be very important for this linebacking crew. What you talked about in your first segment, how they are the leaders, they are the strawberry of your Neapolitan, right? There's a lot of really good things to pay attention to with this linebacking crew. And it's kind of a veteran group too. When you talk about Romaine and you talk about Purnell. So you're almost waiting and hoping for a youngster other than Powers to step up to say, okay, this is the guy that we can pay attention to, maybe be that fourth guy in the rotation and see what we have moving forward into 2026 and beyond, because that's something that you also want to see maybe not in week 0, but maybe in week 1 and 2 when we get some of those non-conference games that you normally get at the beginning of the season.
Is there any one thing that this linebacking unit can do? You said like if Iowa State's unit does this, they win. Is there one thing, or do they need to be on their A game? Can they have a B game and still beat Iowa State?
I don't think so. No, because as I mentioned last week, when we heard it from media days, the offense is miles ahead of the defense heading into the media days and heading into fall camp. And I think that the defense is going to need all the help they can get. Obviously, Avery's got to find a way to get ahead. I think obviously they can find a way to get some scores early from your defense, and that'll obviously help. But if that doesn't happen, if that doesn't occur, then this defense has to be firing in all cylinders to make sure that they can stop your running game, Rocco Beck, the wide receivers, which are still question marks, but wide receivers, and your tight end room, which is, in my opinion, not as good as mine, but we're still got some room there. So there's multiple linebackers on this team. I think there's 13 total at the moment, and I think 7 are juniors and seniors. If I'm looking at it correctly, if I have it all on paper right now, I think there's 13 total with 7 upperclassmen. So there's a lot of oldness there. It's an old room. And you talk about depth with the special team value from like Bo Palmer, from Ralph Ortiz, another transfer who came over. You hopefully that you get that veteranship step up and find a way to lead this program early, find a way to get them caught up in fall camp to make sure they're ready for Dublin. But what I'm really most excited for, and this might be a post-Dublin conversation, is what youngster is going to step up. Will it be a guy like Darian Whitaker, a freshman to watch? The staff has been gushing about him already. He could be a late season riser. Hopefully it could happen a little earlier than later, but we'll see what happens there. But if I had to say, if there's one thing for Kansas State to beat Iowa State when it comes to linebacking core, they got to be firing all cylinders. They got to be aware, they got to have speed, and they cannot create separation.
Got to be on your A game if you're playing the Cyclones. That is for sure. The question is, which team is better? We've previewed every single position group outside of special teams. Now it's time to really let's get down. Let's have the rubber meet the road. Let's really get down and decide which team is better here.
All right, let's do it right here on Farmageddon Friday. Let's break it all down. For the last 8 or 9 weeks, I'd say probably 9 weeks because we had one break talking about media days. We have talked about the entire positional groups between Kansas State and Iowa State. It's been a very fun ride. I've loved this. We're probably going to do this every year. This has been really fun to talk about these teams, to get an idea, to get a good feeling from both our fan bases about the rivalry, the best rivalry in the Big 12, move over BYU, Utah. This is the best rivalry in the Big 12. I love Farmageddon. It is such a good rivalry. And we get to see it week 0, August 23rd, the first game of the college football season. So now let's put it all together. Let's go back and forth and let's talk about what we just had over those last few weeks and give the arrow. Let's call this left, right, center. Okay. But there's going to be no center. We're not going to say there's a push here. You're either going to give it to Iowa State or you're going to give it to Kansas State. We have to have an answer when it comes to these positional groups. We're going to say which one is better. There's 8 on the table, so there's not, I guess we should have probably had an odd person. We probably should have had 9. It's just so we could have said who's a winner here. But who knows?
Could do the host.
Maybe there'll be a
better.
Oh, okay. Well, that would be, you can't have any pushes here, so. Sorry, Nick. Can't have any pushes here. All right, so there's 8 of them. Let's dig into it. And let's talk about the one that we just had for the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and that's the linebacking core. Nick, why do you think Iowa State deserves the linebacking core over Kansas State? Why are they better?
Because Iowa State's linebacking core is the best in the Big 12. It's hard to take a team in the Big 12 over the best in the Big 12. I think of the depth. I think that the returning talent, it's just better than Kansas State, in my opinion, based on the conversation we just had. Do you have any rebuttal there? I think it's Iowa State by a mile.
I don't know if I'd go by a mile, but that's probably my only rebuttal. I will hand it to you. I think you guys get the linebacking core heading into Dublin. I do think you bring back a lot of talent. I think there's a little bit more question marks when it comes to Kansas State's linebacking core. Now, if you were telling me who is the best one player between the linebacking, I think Austin Romaine beats that out. But as a whole, as a positional group, I'm handing it to you for Iowa State. So there you go, 1-0. You got the win for now. There you go. First score on the board for the Cyclones. Let's go to the secondary. And I think this is where we even it up. I think this is where Kansas State evens the score here. Look, even though they lost both Jacob Parrish, Marcus Siegel to the NFL draft, I think they did a great job in the transfer portal, bringing in guys like Amarian Fortenberry, bringing in guys like Jaden Rowe, I think who's going to be an absolute monster of an athlete. And we don't even know if those guys are going to be on the field, because what we saw from some of the youngsters in the Rape Bowl, from like Zayshawn Rich, Donovan McIntyre, Zach Fabris even, it's just a lot of excitement from them. So I do think you're going to see a step up from the secondary. And as I mentioned, talking about these linebackers and defensive line last week as well, it wasn't the secondary, even though we blamed them a lot last year for having the blunders. It was the lack of pass rush, the lack of presence. So I think with all things included and what this defense looks like, although they might be a step behind to where they need to be at the moment, I think they have greatly actually improved, which is wild to say after having 2 NFL draft picks this past April. So I don't know if you can agree here, but I think Kansas State deserves the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State punches right in the mouth. How does Kansas State respond? I do think they tie it up. I do think that Iowa State's secondary probably isn't quite on the same level. That doesn't mean that they're not very good or whatever, but I did label them as probably my biggest question mark going into this season. I think that they can get it done. I think they've got the dudes to get it done. Jontez, certainly a huge name in that room. Benny Ngoye, a name that wasn't brought up in our breakdown. I think they can be all right, but I think between the two, I'll give you the nod there. The question, though, how do we round out the defense? Who wins the defense here?
Yeah, because we're on defensive lines, right here with the edges and the linemen here. Yeah, I'll have to go this. I'm going to stick to my word here. The fact that what we heard from Chris Kleiman and what we heard from some of the coaches here, they said the offense is way ahead of the defense heading into media days. And although there's some veteran presence, although there was some really good hype on defensive end of like Ryan Davis, a guy that I was not tracking to be a guy who was going to make a big impact for Kansas State right off the bat, I'm gonna have to hand it to you. You guys had someone at media days. You have some experience coming from the defensive line. You think they're going to be improved, as you mentioned, talking of it last week. And because the Kansas State defense is just not to where they need to be, I don't think I can, in good gracious, take the win. I don't think I can take it. I think I have to. Do I have to let you have it? No, I think you deserved it. So I'll give the defensive line to you.
Fair enough. Yeah, I definitely think that the defensive line at Iowa State's going to be a lot better this year. I think they're going to fix a lot of problems that Iowa State had on defense just in general with, run stuffing. Run defense wasn't very good last year. I think they'll get to the quarterback more. It's going to help this secondary that I don't think is as good as last year. I could be wrong on that, but it's going to kind of, like we said in that secondary preview, it would kind of level it out a little bit. I do think our defensive line is going to be quite solid this year.
All right, so we'll play an early halftime here just because we're switching to the offense. At the end of the defense, Iowa State leads 2-1 in this one. So we got 5 for the offense, though. And with the offensive positional episodes, I mean, they were crazy. They were great breakdowns. We even talked about some Frozen songs. There was a lot of fun things talking about the offense. And one of those that we talked about, of course, was the offensive line. And look, I think I have to fight really hard for this offensive line. And I'm going to be on the fair side here. I think I'm going to fight really hard for some of this offense stuff because I think that's where Kansas State shines this year is on their offensive side. Just like I said just a minute ago about the media days, the offense is way ahead than the defense when it comes to being prepared. This offensive line really only lost one player in Willis, who headed to Washington. They brought in some great transfers, some fantastic transfers. And George Fitzpatrick, who's on the left tackle, is going to start left tackle, coming over for the national champions in Ohio State. Bring over J.B. Nelson, who might not even start, but was a honorable mention in the Big Ten just 2 years ago. There's a lot of really exciting things about this offensive line. They just promoted the offensive line coach to become the offensive line coach of the Dallas Cowboys because of all the production this offensive line has done in the past. You bring up Brian LePeck, the tight end coach. I think this offensive line could turn into one of the biggest strengths of Kansas State this year. So I think I'm going to fight really hard. I think Kansas State ties it up here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There are question marks around Iowa State's offensive line. It's going to be close. I think that Kansas State wins this just because they're better. I don't think that this is a problem area for Iowa State. I think it's an area that a lot of coaches are extremely excited about. I know during a media availability after spring practice, the way that the offensive line was talked about and the way that they're wearing like Rocco Beck shirts and hats and like the synergy, it's all there. It's all there. I'm not concerned about the offensive line, but I do think that there is an argument that Kansas State's offensive line is slightly better. All right, we're tied up 2-2. Let's move towards the tight ends, and I'm going to start it here because I know you're pretty passionate. Iowa State's tight ends, man, I am super excited about it. I think they've got a lot of returning guys that are coming back off injury, whatever. They're going to be good. I think they got young talent, but you were really excited about Kansas State's tight ends. Are they better? 100%. Do you get this point as well?
Yes, they are. And I'm not saying that just because they're better than Iowa State. I think they're better than every single team in the country, not even just the Big 12. I think this is the best tight end room in the country. They led the entire country in red zone touchdowns last year with 13, and they're bringing back every single one of those players. And they added Lincoln Cure, the top recruit in program history, who might not even get to see the light of day of the playing field because there's so many other players. If they do, you're talking 5 potential tight ends who could make a huge impact for Kansas State this season, all that had a huge impact last year. Even if it's just a few receptions, they found themselves in the end zone. So I think Kansas State has one of the best tight end rooms in the country, not just the Big 12. So yeah, there's no way you're taking that one from me. So consider that one maybe like a turnover because Kansas State scores twice here, take the lead 3-2.
The first time we've seen Kansas State leading, where do we go next? Iowa State's got to tie it up here.
Yeah, you know what? I think this one's tough for me because I think there's a lot of excitement for this positional group for Kansas State, but losing DJ Giddens, I think, is going to be tough. Now, I don't think the running back room is going to falter, but what Iowa State's running back room has done against Kansas State over the past, especially 2 years ago, I feel like it would make sense for me not to be able, especially since DJ Giddens is gone. I don't think, again, in good gracious, I could say Kansas State deserves this one, but you tell me why Iowa State deserves it. Because I think,
essentially, as we enter what is kind of the fourth quarter here of these breakdowns, Iowa State ties it up with the running back room. A lot of returning experience. Abu Sama, every Kansas State fan, I think we've ended that conversation. Carson Hansen really stepped into his own last year. I think he could be just a weapon this year. There's a real chance of that. And River Peppers, a name that just constantly is being brought up. A young kid.
Name. That's the reason right there you should have just won it. I mean, you just ended right there.
I know. I completely agree. So, yeah, I do think this running back room is better. We've only got 2 left out of the 8, and it's all tied up. What's going on?
Tied at 3 right here. Let's talk about wide receivers. Probably the biggest question mark for you, losing 167 receptions between Higgins and Noel. But that was the biggest issue for Kansas State's offense last year was the wide receiver room. I think, you let me know if I'm wrong here, but you lost your top 2 wide receivers. We didn't lose our wide receiver 1. So I think just on that alone, if you have no idea about what your transfers are going to do and what our transfers are going to do, which I think our transfers are going to crush it, by the way, and you think yours are going to as well, I'm excited about the size of Kansas State. But just off the fact that we're getting wide receiver 1 back in Jace Brown, and you got to find a way to replace 167 receptions just based off wide receiver 1 and 2 from Rocco Beck, I think you got to give it to the Wildcats.
Major shout out to Jason Sowell and Xavier Townsend, 2 dogs for Iowa State coming in. Although, I will say the entire time we talked about offense, what I kept saying was it's going to be a multi-group passing attack. So I will give you the wide receivers, though I do think that the transfers will be very, very good for Iowa State, just based on what I've said in the offensive breakdowns. I'm going to stick to my word there. So Kansas State taking a lead late in this one with only 1 group left. And it's not even a group, it's a player. The quarterback.
Yeah, Rocco Beck versus Avery Johnson. Look, if we were playing truly left, right, center, I think this is a center call. I really do. But we can't play that. That's not fair. That's not what we decide to do here. I could fight for you why I think Avery Johnson is not only the best quarterback in the Big 12, but I think a potential dark horse candidate for the Heisman Trophy. I can. But he had his issues last year. He had some throwing concerns. He got injured a little bit. He wasn't really 100% after Colorado. There was some woes. Rocco Beck, God, this hurts to say, found himself in the Big 12 championship game last year. Although he lost some wide receivers, I don't think you can take that from him when talking about just true who deserves the left or right here. So maybe it's just because I feel bad because you're down 4-3. Maybe that's the case. Maybe. I think Iowa State, because you won Farmageddon last year, you went to the Big 12 championship, you can have the quarterback. But you can't have Avery Johnson's strawberry lemonade. And that might be more important than any of this.
Yeah, I kind of want some of that strawberry lemonade with my Neapolitan ice cream. I'm not going to lie. That does sound really good. No, I think that Avery Johnson, an unbelievable quarterback. I think that we're going to see some really great things out of him this year. I think just based at this point in time, I think we've seen bigger things from Rocco, less mistakes probably. Not that he's perfect by any means, but he certainly played up to the moments, I think, a lot last year. And, I think that he's got that run game too. It's not like he's lacking the run side of it. It's not like we've got a dual threat or a pocket passer. No, they're both kind of in that same realm. So I agree. Obviously, I'm going to lean Rocco. That doesn't make any sense for me to argue Avery Johnson here. But finishing 8, through 8 position groups, 4-4, this is going to be an unbelievable game.
It's going to be an unbelievable game. Let me just go ahead and go to the camera real quick. I will never doubt you, Avery Johnson, ever. This is not me doubting you.
You were talking to me.
Never.
Man.
Well, I doubted your Neapolitan ice cream cake, so I think we already are. So, yeah, this is going to be a crazy game. This is going to be crazy, and we still got a couple weeks still to talk about it. There's plenty to talk about fall camp. We're going to dig into storylines of what's going on each side of the football. Just because we broke down every positional breakdown doesn't mean we're done talking about this game, because we still have weeks to go until it goes up. So now we're going to talk about the storylines that actually matter, not just our thoughts and opinions on how each positional group looks like. Now we're going to dig into the meat and potatoes. Look at putting a potato conversation in on an Irish game. I love that. We're going to do that.
There we go.
In the near future. Lots to talk about here. So Nick, take us out.
Romaine lettuce, Neapolitan ice cream, mashed potatoes, strawberry lemonade. It's a recipe for a great game over in Dublin. Thank you all for listening to Farmageddon Fridays. It's not going anywhere. We'll be back next week to break it down even further. Hit subscribe down below. It's free and helps us prove that this is the greatest rivalry in the Big 12. Until next time. See you then.
Potatoes.
Dude, it's got to be
Neapolitan ice cream.
It's got to be the best meal. I mean, the lemonade.